Being part of a mafia crime family involves a bond bigger than blood. The willingness to put your life into the hands of someone else and know that if you break the code, your life is forfeit. This is not just paramount, but a prerequisite. However, when you have blood in the game, it makes the former a lot easier. Let's dive into 5 of the most murderous mobsters from the Gambino crime family, beginning with Jo Jo Corozzo, the consigliere whose brothers were bosses and whose son became the infamous mafia lawyer looking out for the family's interest in the courtroom instead of the streets. Born in Brownsville, Brooklyn during the beginning of World War II, Joseph Corozzo was one of 4 boys born into the rough borough of New York City. His childhood was relatively quiet for a boy, with all of his siblings becoming members of the Mafia. Young Jo Jo commenced his criminal career with the Gambino family and stuck with them until the end. He started small by hijacking commercial truckloads carrying anything from cigarettes to collectible cards. He earned a different moniker as he began rising through the ranks. They also called him Miserable Corozzo due to his intense mood swings. Jo Jo picked up his first ever charge for contempt of court in 1971. He was hauled in for questioning by a grand jury and refused to answer any questions regarding organized crime in New York. He was arrested on the spot and served 30 days for his first crime. As his reputation rose amongst his crew and rivals, he also decided to settle down and have a son, Joseph R. Corozzo Jr., a key figure in the Mafia family's success. The late 1970s and 1980s is really where Jo Jo made his mark. His crimes escalated from contempt to illegal contraband and much more. Like most mobsters, Corozzo became involved in racketeering and extortion during that time period. He focused heavily on the unions in the New York area, forcing contracts in the direction of the family. When intimidation and brute force became dull for him, Corozzo cascaded down into the drug trafficking realm. Business was booming and the narcotics were moving. The 1980s saw an untold amount of wealth brought in by Corozzo and his many operations. It's said that his drug distribution ring alone was accumulating over $10 million every single year. With money piling up and the bosses pleased, Corozzo received a promotion to capo regime during his epic rise in that decade. The 1990s took a hard turn for Corozzo and the Gambino family. Just a year after the new and last decade of the century kicked off, Gambino boss John Gotti was involved in the racketeer-influenced and corrupt Organizations Act trial. During the legal battle, Jo Jo Corozzo was specifically named as a lead role in the crime family's activities and was officially in the spotlight. Fortunately for Corozzo and the Gambino family, a new ally was just entering the game. After graduating from law school in that same year, Corozzo Jr. not only passed the bar to become an attorney, but also started his own practice with partner Ronald Rubinstein. Together, they established Rubinstein and Corozzo LLP and began taking on huge clientele. Ranging from brokers to Billboard music artists, these two took on tons of cases and obtained an impressive winning record against federal cases. But they didn't just work with wealthy members of high society. It was well known that Corozzo Jr. used his overly aggressive trial skills to represent alleged members of the Mafia, specifically the Gambino family. In 1992, Jo Jo Corozzo was promoted once more to consigliere when Frank Cali was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But as he rose in rank, he also climbed into the legal combat ring. At the end of 1992, he was indicted on several charges in New York, varying from hijacking and horse betting to extortion and loan sharking. Just 2 years later, in '94, Corozzo was also brought up on charges in New Orleans, Louisiana, for racketeering. Allegedly, the Gambino family utilized their connections down south to infiltrate the video poker gaming industry. As the summer started in 1995, he was advised by his son to take a plea agreement. Corozzo was acquitted on all of the charges he racked up in New York, but pleaded guilty to conspiracy counts in the New Orleans court case and was sentenced to 3 years in prison at the federal prison camp Montgomery, Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama. After serving his stint, he emerged back into action like nothing happened. It's claimed that he was even elevated again within the family to underboss for a period. During a trial in 2003, Michael "Mikey Scars" DiLeonardo testified that Corozzo was the final decision-maker in the family by the end of the 90s and was basically running the family along with a few other key members like Arnold "Zeke" Squitieri. However, the law never rests regarding the protection of its citizens. On February 7, 2008, Corozzo was indicted again under Operation Old Bridge. This massive move against the Gambino family was in a direct effort to stop its numerous illicit activities like drug dealing and extorting payments from local construction and trucking companies. By June, Corozzo and the DA had come to another plea agreement. All charges were dropped, but Jo Jo had to plead guilty to racketeering conspiracy. In a surprising turn, he was only sentenced to 46 months in prison, a small amount of time for a repeat offender. But the legal system wasn't quite done with Corozzo yet. With just 5 months left on his sentence from the conspiracy racketeering charge, he was indicted again. This time the FBI had compiled a litany of evidence in the Narcotics Trafficking Division and presented the court with details of drug distribution from cocaine to ecstasy. On September 19, 2012, John Corozzo Sr. received another conviction and was sentenced to 5 more years in prison. On January 5, 2016, he was released and is believed to be retired from the Gambino Mafia family and living in New York. Insanity is a term often associated with the world's most infamous criminals. But to be known as a top mobster signifies a level of cunning and menace that few can fathom. So grab your fedora and step into the shadows as we explore the life and death of Francesco Paolo Augusto Frank Cali, also known as Frankie Boy. As the acting boss of the Gambino crime family, Cali was the bridge between New York's mafia and their Sicilian counterparts. Described by authorities as a man of unparalleled influence, his violent end on a quiet Staten Island street in 2019 is shrouded in the bizarre haze of QAnon conspiracy theories. Cali was born on March 26, 1965, in New York City, to Augusto Cesare Cali and Agata Schimecca, both from Palermo, Sicily. His father ran a household goods store in Palermo and a video store in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Though Augusto had a clean police record in the United States, he was connected to the infamous Pizza Connection investigation, being a partner of Domenico Adamita, who was tied to Sicilian mafia boss Gaetano Badalamenti. Frank Cali grew up surrounded by shadows and whispers of organized crime. His uncle was Sicilian mobster John Gambino, and he had strong connections to the powerful Sicilian mafia family led by Salvatore Incerillo. Cali was also related to Gambino Crime Family mobsters Giovanni Bonventre and Vito Bonventre. As a young man, Cali bonded with Gambino mobster Jackie D'Amico, a lieutenant of the infamous John Gotti, who ran a crew on 18th Avenue in Brooklyn. By January 1997, the FBI informed Italian authorities that Cali had been inducted into the Gambino family. He was quickly promoted to acting capo when D'Amico became acting boss. Cali operated several import-export companies in Brooklyn, including Circus Fruits Wholesale. His ties to the Sicilian mafia were strong. He married Rosaria Inzerillo, a sister of Pietro Inzerillo and a relative of Gambino associate Frank Inzerillo, a member of the Palamitan Inzerillo family. After losing the Second Mafia War in the early 1980s, the Inzerillo family fled Sicily. Cali, along with old Palermo boss Filippo Casamento, supported their return to Palermo. The Italian state police claimed Cali was a member of the Sicilian Cosa Nostra. He acted as a contact for Sicilian mafiosi traveling to New York, conducting business and staying updated on Sicilian affairs. "He's our friend, and he is everything over there," said Sicilian mobster Gianni Nicchi to his boss Antonio Rotolo after a trip in 2003. Nicchi, known as one of Cali's men of honor, trafficked drugs between Palermo and the United States, eventually settling in Daytona Beach, Florida, where he employed high school students as drug runners. In early 2003, Cali and fellow captain Leonard "Lenny" DiMaria began extorting mob taxes from Joseph Vogliaro, owner of a trucking and contracting company involved in building a NASCAR speedway on Staten Island. Vogliaro was forced to pay tens of thousands of dollars to D'Amico and Gambino boss Nicholas Corozzo. In 2004, to avoid prison for a cocaine conviction, Vogliaro turned informant, leading to a massive indictment 4 years later. On February 8, 2008, Cali and 61 other New York Cosa Nostra associates were arrested in Operation Old Bridge, which aimed to dismantle drug trafficking between the Sicilian mafia and the Gambino family. Prosecutors claimed Cali was the Gambino ambassador to the Sicilian mobsters and a liaison between D'Amico and Sicilian connections. He was charged with racketeering, extortion, and conspiracy, along with D'Amico and DiMaria. On June 4, 2008, Cali pleaded guilty to conspiring to extort money from Vogliaro and was incarcerated at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. He was released 10 months later on April 6, 2009. Around this time, Cali's uncle John Gambino joined the family's ruling panel. The US Justice Department demanded that Cali avoid all contact with Gambino except for weddings or holiday celebrations approved in advance by his probation officer. In October 2012, crime reporter Jerry Capecci identified Cali as the new underboss of the Gambino Crime Family. Brooklyn federal prosecutors also referred to him as underboss. Though his status remained unclear, Cali's promotion, along with that of Domenico Cefalu, indicated the Sicilian faction's dominance in recent years. In July 2013, Cali turned down the position of boss of the family. In August 2015, the New York Daily News reported Cali had become the acting boss of the Gambino family. By September 29, 2018, Cali had infused the family with zips, hoodlums from the old country, and bulked up its heroin and OxyContin business. A gangster in Italy stated that Cali is everything over there. Cali's life ended violently on March 13, 2019. At 53, he was shot around 9:20 p.m. outside his home on Hilltop Terrace in the Tot Hill area. He died at Staten Island University Hospital and was buried 6 days later at Moravian Cemetery in New Dorp, Staten Island. This marked the first murder of a New York crime boss since Paul Castellano's assassination in 1985. Surveillance footage showed a pickup truck hitting Cali's parked Cadillac, a confrontation between Cali and the driver, and then the shooting. Cali tried to use his vehicle as a shield, but was hit 10 times by 9mm bullets. On March 16th, 24-year-old Anthony Camello was arrested in Brick, New Jersey by the NYPD and U.S. Marshals to face murder charges. Authorities initially thought the crime might be related to a personal dispute or a romantic issue, not organized crime. On April 3rd, Camello was indicted and held in protective custody. On May 10th, Camello pleaded not guilty to murder and weapon possession charges, despite initially confessing to the murder. Mob experts suggested he was almost certainly marked for death. In July 2019, Camello's defense attorney claimed he had become obsessed with QAnon conspiracy theories, believing Cali was part of a deep state. Convinced he was protected by President Trump, Camello had tried to handcuff Cali and place him under citizen's arrest, as he had attempted months earlier with New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio and California Congresswoman Maxine Waters. The reason Cali was targeted remained unclear. The New York Times reported that at his first court appearance, Camello displayed symbols and phrases associated with QAnon scrawled on his hand. His defense sought to prove him not guilty by reason of mental defect. In December 2019, Camello refused a psychiatric exam, jeopardizing his right to use an insanity defense. The judge also denied a motion to suppress his initial confession. In June 2020, Camello was found mentally unfit to stand trial.
The cold iron tracks of the Long Island Railroad clattered beneath the feet of DiMaria, a man once known as the Conductor. But this wasn't a tale of a humble railroad worker. It was a journey into the shadowy depths of organized crime. A man who traded the whistle and uniform for the dark allure of the Gambino crime family, where loyalty was bought with blood and betrayal lurked at every corner. Meet Leonard the Conductor DiMaria, the guy who rose to power in the 1980s. His story is one of ambition, violence, and the relentless pursuit of power, a true descent into the underworld, where every move could be his last. DiMaria was born to Italian immigrants from Moliterno, in the province of Potenza. Before diving into a life of crime, he worked as a railroad conductor for the Long Island Railroad and the New York and Atlantic Railway. These early jobs earned him the nickname the Conductor. However, the lure of the criminal underworld proved too strong to resist. By the early 1980s, DiMaria had climbed the ranks to become a captain in the notorious Gambino crime family. His right-hand man and bodyguard, Thomas Spade Muschio, was a young enforcer, only 24 when he was imprisoned in Rayford, Florida State Prison in 1983. After his release in 1985, Muschio served a probation period until 1988. Residing now in North Carolina and Toms River, New Jersey, Muschio had been introduced to organized crime by Robert Bobby Cabert Bisaccia and quickly made a name for himself. Together, DiMaria and Muschio ran loan sharking and extortion operations in Queens and Brooklyn, becoming close associates of Nicholas Corozzo. In August 1986, DiMaria was embroiled in a high-profile racketeering case alongside boss John Gotti, Willie Boy Johnson, who, despite being outed as an informant, refused to testify against his comrades, Tony Rampino, Nicholas Corazzo, and John Carniglia. On March 13, 1987, the court acquitted all defendants of the charges, reinforcing their untouchable reputation. By 1995, DiMaria, along with Gambino Capos, Ralph Davino Jr., and Anthony Ruggiano Jr., and Anthony Tony Pep Trenacosta expanded their operations to Florida under Corozzo's direction. This South Florida crew managed criminal activities across both New York and Florida. The crew joined forces with the local Tampa Mafia family, the Traficantes, to seamlessly introduce their new import business. On December 18, 1996, DiMaria's criminal enterprise came under fire when he was arrested at his home in Flatlands, Brooklyn, on loan sharking and racketeering charges in Florida. While out on bail, DiMaria was indicted again a month later for similar crimes in New York. The FBI had conducted a 3-year investigation, partly based on evidence from the Portobello Soccer Club in Canarsie, Brooklyn, which was a sting operation. The club bought stolen designer clothing, computers, and other goods from Gambino mobsters. DiMaria, unaware of the trap, even befriended the undercover FBI agent running the sting and was caught on surveillance video hugging him. After 6 weeks of house arrest, DiMaria and Corozzo were sent to the federal lockup to await trials in both New York and Florida. On November 3, 1997, DiMaria pleaded guilty to 15 New York charges, including racketeering, extortion, and loan sharking, receiving a 10-year prison sentence to be served in Cumberland, Maryland. In January 1998, he also pleaded guilty to the Florida charges. Released from prison in 2005, DiMaria wasted no time resuming his criminal activities, running racketeering and loan sharking operations in Queens, Brooklyn, and South Florida for Corozzo and John Jackie Knows D'Amico. Rumors swirled that DiMaria might become underboss. In February 2008, DiMaria was caught up in Operation Old Bridge, a massive federal investigation targeting the Gambino family. On June 4, 2008, he pleaded guilty to racketeering and extortion-related charges. He admitted to conspiring to extort money from contractor trucker Joseph Volaro, a former Mafia associate turned informant, who had recorded incriminating conversations over 3 years. DiMaria was incarcerated at the Federal Correctional Institution Otisville and was released on August 31, 2012, leaving behind a legacy of crime and betrayal that echoed through the dark streets he once ruled.
When working for the same firm your whole life, it's not uncommon to see the president of the company change once during a lifetime of employment. However, in the criminal underworld of the Gambino Mafia family, regime changes can happen often and in an explosive manner. Let's delve into the life and crimes of one Joseph N. Gallo of the Gambino Syndicate. Not to be confused with Joe Gallo from the Colombo family, this Gallo worked under not one, not two, but 3 different bosses during his years of service to the cause. Joseph N. Gallo was born on January 8, 1912 in Calabria, Italy. But he grew up in the gritty streets of Manhattan's Little Italy. From a young age, Gallo was no stranger to the rough and tumble world of crime. He married at an early age and had a son. He was the father of Gambino associate Joseph C. Gallo. With money tight, he settled with his family in the shadowy neighborhoods of Mill Basin, Brooklyn, and Long Island City, Queens. In the turbulent 1930s, Gallo's illegal activities caught up with him, leading to a conviction for illegal gambling in New York. But prison bars couldn't contain his ambitions. Over the years, he built a formidable power base within the New York garment industry, cloaking his criminal empire behind a facade of legitimate business. Owning a dress manufacturing company in Brooklyn, he gradually took control of the Greater Blouse, Shirt, and Undergarment Association, a key trade group, using it to weave a web of influence and intimidation. Gallo's criminal connections ran deep. He had strong ties with the infamous Traficante crime family of Tampa, Florida, and the ruthless New Orleans crime boss, Carlos Marcello. Often he represented these powerful figures at clandestine Cosa Nostra meetings in New York, acting as a bridge between some of the most dangerous men in America. In the early 1970s, after the mysterious disappearance of Joseph Riccobono, Gallo stepped into the role of consigliere under the feared boss Carlo Gambino. As Gambino's health declined, whispers in the dark suggested Gallo might be his successor. However, fate had other plans. On February 21, 1974, Gallo suffered a severe heart attack. Though he recovered, the ordeal left him without the strength or desire to ascend to the throne of the Gambino family. Instead, he continued to serve as consigliere under the new boss, Paul Castellano, and later under the notorious John Gotti after Castellano's bloody assassination in 1985. Gallo's criminal reign was brought to an abrupt end on December 22, 1987, when he was convicted under the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations RICO Act. The charges included 2 counts of bribery and 1 count of illegal interstate travel to commit bribery. In February 1988, he was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison and slapped with fines totaling $380,000. Recognizing his advanced age and frail health, the court allowed him to spend one last Christmas with his family before he began his sentence. At the time, he was the oldest inmate in federal custody. With Gallo behind bars, Gotti replaced him with the ruthless capo Sammy Gravano as consigliere. In 1995, after serving his time, Gallo was released from prison, a shadow of his former self. On September 1, 1995, Joseph N. Gallo passed away from natural causes in Astoria, Queens. His final resting place is St. Michael's Cemetery in East Elmhurst, Queens, where he lies beneath the weight of a lifetime of crime and secrets. When the Mafia sets its sights on you, having a shot just graze your ear is unheard of. A single gesture from the boss can seal your fate, determining whether you meet a gruesome end or vanish without a trace. Let's delve into the shadows of one of the most turbulent tyrants in Mafia history, Frank Scalice. Frank Scalice lived at 211 Kirby Street in the outlier enclave of City Island. The unassuming 3-bedroom weatherboard house built in 1940 stood quietly in the Bronx, yet it was the epicenter of Frank's shadowy reign. The Anastasia Mafia crime family bowed to him. Nothing of significance moved without his nod. Officially, he was vice president at Mario and DiBono, a plastering company in Corona, Queens, since at least 1954. Unofficially, he controlled the borough's construction industries with an iron grip. Not a single bag of cement shifted without his say-so. His company handled major projects at Idlewild Airport, now JFK, a hospital in the Bronx, and numerous city-owned housing projects. Frank turned up one day at the company, and somehow he became one of the owners. Everyone knew he was Cosa Nostra. In his older age, he was sometimes referred to as Cheech or Ciccio, common diminutives for Frank in Italian neighborhoods. Francesco Scalice was born in Palermo, Sicily, on March 31, 1893. He and his brothers emigrated to America, settling in the Bronx. By 1919, Frank was a United States citizen, with his first criminal record for grand larceny burglary in New Rochelle. He married his first cousin, and one of their children was a mentally handicapped deaf-mute. By 1931, Frank was the boss of a New York Mafia family. He had a butcher shop in the Bronx as a legitimate front. His brother-in-law, Mafia capo David Amodeo, operated one in the Bronx, and Michele Giacomo Scarpula, Rosa's husband, ran another in Brooklyn. His sons, Angelo, another butcher, and Philip, were also part of the crime family. Frank was possibly involved in bootlegging during Prohibition, working with Vincenzo Jimmy Marino Lepore. By the 1920s, Frank had joined Salvatore D'Aquila's Mafia family in the Bronx. After D'Aquila was murdered in 1928, an underworld war erupted between Giuseppe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano for control of Cosa Nostra. Maranzano had Frank's support, and after the murder of Alfredo Mineo in 1930, Frank became the family head. When Maranzano ordered him to kill Vincent Mangano, Frank refused and brokered peace with Salvatore Lucania, aka Charlie Luciano. Maranzano's death led to Frank stepping down as head of the family, replaced by Mangano. The Mafia lives and dies by its politics. Everything ran smoothly until 1951, when Vincent and his brother Philip were murdered, and Albert Anastasia took over the family, making Frank his number 2. Frank had risen and fallen in the Mafia hierarchy, from soldier to capo to boss, then back to capo, and up again in 20 years. Since his deportation in 1946, the feds had been watching Luciano closely. Living in Naples, he was suspected of orchestrating drug trafficking between Italy and America. Despite numerous allegations, Luciano was never prosecuted for drug-related crimes. The link between him and Frank in drug trafficking remains speculative. The major drug operations in Italy between 1948 and 1952 involved illicit narcotics trade from legitimate chemists in Milan, Turin and Genoa. How much of this found its way to America and through what sources remains unclear, though Frank and New York mobster Joe Di Palermo might have been involved. The FBI files claim Frank wasn't the only New York hood to visit Luciano. Carlo Gambino and his brother Paul reportedly met Luciano in Palermo in 1948. The law suspected the meeting was about heroin smuggling between the Mafia in Palermo and the United States on behalf of Luciano. Frank led a busy life, coordinating the family's criminal activities across the city. Meetings with Capi, who ran the crews that kept the wheels of criminal commerce rolling, were a part of his routine. However, his predictable habits would be his downfall. On June 17, 1957, Frank drove his blue Cadillac from his island home to the Belmont area, parking it outside 625 Crescent Avenue. He made the short walk to his brother's candy store on Arthur Avenue, the Little Italy of the Bronx. Every Monday, Frank lunched with Giacomo, discussing business while enjoying mozzarella, roast peppers and baked clams at Ann and Tony's. After lunch, Frank would stroll down the street, chatting with locals, unaware that his routine had made him a target. The hit was meticulously planned. Two young men, eager to prove their worth, were chosen for the job. It's alleged Vincent Squillanti arranged the contract to kill Frank, possibly on Anastasia's orders. The killers, dressed identically to confuse witnesses, walked into the fruit shop where Frank was selecting produce. They drew their .38 caliber revolvers and fired 5 times, hitting Frank in the throat, cheek and shoulder. He collapsed, blood pooling around him as the killers calmly exited, leaving chaos in their wake. The aftermath was a blur of sirens, shouting and confusion. The sun shone outside as Frank's body lay sprawled on the floor, a grim testament to the ruthless efficiency of Mafia justice. On June 18th, investigators from the Bronx District Attorney's Office opened a safe deposit box at the Dollar Saving Bank. The box, belonging to Frank's wife, contained $950 in cash, $2,000 in bearer bonds, and some jewelry. A search of his City Island home yielded $192 in cash and a loan sharking ledger with the names of well-known businessmen and officials. Despite his influence, the absence of significant cash in Frank's holdings puzzled investigators. The Bronx District Attorney, David V. Sullivan, referred to Frank as a big shot and kingpin in this area. The motive behind Frank's murder remains a mystery. Rumors suggested he had welched on a drug deal or that Vito Genovese ordered the hit to weaken Anastasia. Another story claimed Frank was selling Mafia memberships, enraging Anastasia. Joe Valachi, a government informant, suggested Frank's death was due to selling memberships into the Anastasia crime family. Following Frank's murder, some of his holdings were handed over to Arthur Leo and Papa Dave Amadeo. Anastasia likely took his share. Frank's funeral service was held at Scocoza Funeral Home, just a short walk from where he had parked his car. He was buried in Woodlawn Cemetery, a National Historic Landmark of the Bronx. 1957 was a disastrous year for New York's Mafia. Vito Genovese's attempt to kill Frank Costello failed. Anastasia probably killed Frank Scalice and was himself killed months later, likely by Carlo Gambino's men. In November, the Appalachian meeting exposed the Mafia's existence to the public, marking a tumultuous period in Cosa Nostra's history. In the end, Frank's predictable habits and the volatile nature of Mafia politics led to his brutal demise, a reminder of the dark, violent world he inhabited.